That's what I like to hear. Perfect. How's the sound quality, guys? Good? Okay. So I have my microphone in, so I figured that way you can hear things nice and clear, hopefully. All right. Good investment. Previously, so we're on Hay on the base, 5B for anyone who needs to find the place. Sorry, not, well, 1 second. Yeah, 5B. Yes, 5B. We're on 5B, Hay on the base. Previously, in our Gemara shir, we learned the source for 10 tfachim. This is the big $1 million question. We know, we've been talking about this for a while, that in Kol HaTorah Kula, whenever we talk about the height of a mechitza, that means 10 tfachim, 10 handbreadths, which depending on whose shita you go with, is maybe 40 inches, depending how you rule. Now, the first way we determined this was through the aron. The aron was 9 tfachim, and the kaporos is 1 tefach. So altogether, we see that 10. We learn from there 10 tfachim, and that's how we get the idea that a mechitza is 10 tfachim. If you take a look in the Gemara, we're about a little over a quarter way down, maybe even closer to 1/3 the way down. We're at the words umimai dechalala asara bar mischacha. So it should show up, I imagine, as a new section in the art scroll. Umimai dechalala asara bar mischacha. The question is here, right? Do you guys have the place? Need a second? Good. Okay. So the question is, how do I know that I don't know what the right way to put this is, the hollow area of the sukkah, the actual airspace of the sukkah needs to be 10 tfachim on its own. Maybe ema bahadischacha. Maybe the same way the kapores counted towards the 10 tfachim, it was the 9th tefach. Maybe if the schach is a tefach thick, you only need walls that are 9 tfachim tall, and then a schach that makes the 10 tfachim. How do I know that the actual airspace needs to be 10 tfachim, and it does not suffice just with the schach being the cherry on top to reach that threshold? We got the question? Okay. So, Ella mi beis olamim gamarla. I need to say like a Yihiratzon and a Kapitel Tehillim right now. This, I think, is our first foray into mathematics here. And this is what scared me. I said I'm going to overcome my fear of math when we do Sukkah. There's more intense math coming up, I think, on Daf Ches in that area. Let's see if I'm right. If you take a look at the bottom of 7b, Zayin and Beis and Chesam and Aleph, you see all the circles and squares, and there's a discussion about pi. So this is going to be our first attempt at mathematics, and hopefully this goes well. And just bear with me on it, okay? I wish I had charts and diagrams, but hopefully I'll do a good job explaining it, not just to you, but hopefully I'll understand it well also. Okay, here we go. So again, our goal is, where can I figure out that 10 tfachim means 10 tfachim, not including the schach? I mean 10 tfachim and then schach on top of 10 tfachim. Where do I see that? Where can I find a proof? So Ella, this is a long stretch. So let me just do this long stretch and then we'll take questions if there are. Ella mi beis olamim gamarla. Let us derive this from the Beis HaMikdash, from the temple. Dichsiv b'habayis asher bana hamelech Shlomo laHashem Shishim ama orcho, vesrim rachbo, shloshim ama komaso. So we see from here that the height of the Beis HaMikdash was 30 amos. Okay. Uchsiv, you just mute the noise in the background. I can't do it on my end right now, but if you just mute any background noise, thank you. 30 amos is the height. Uchsiv Komas hakruv ha'achad eser ba'ama, and then it says that the height of. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do it on my end. I'm sorry. I need absolute concentration on this one. It's math. Okay. Usiv komas hakruv ha'achad eser ba'ama, v'chein hakruv ha'sheni. So here's what we know. We know that the Beis HaMikdash was 30 amos tall. And we know that the kruvim were 10, measured up to, they were at the 10 amos tall. So Utanya mamatzina bebeis olamim kruvim b'shlish habayis heinomdin. The same way that the kruvim took up a third of the Beis Hamikdash's height, Mishkan nami kruvim b'shlish habayis heinomdin. We can infer that it's logical that without evidence suggesting otherwise, that the kruvim, when they were in the Mishkan, kamahavi eser amos. So kamahavi eser amos. The siv. Oh, sorry, I lose the place. I think I lost the place. 1 second. Sorry. Tanya. Where was I? Okay. Utani mamatzin beis olamim kruvim b'shlish habayis heinomdin. Mishkan nami kruvim b'shlish habayis heinomdin. So Mishkan kamahavi. How tall is the Mishkan? Eser amos. Okay, so now the Mishkan was shorter. The Mishkan was only 10 amos tall. T'chsiv eser amos orecha keresh. So kamahavi lahu. How much is 10 amos in tfachim? Shis in poshche. That's 60 tfachim. So Tolse Kamahavi, what's a third of that? Esrim Poshchi, that's 20 Tfachim. So Dal Asara to Aron Kapores. So remove the 10 Tfachim of the Aron and the Kapores, right? We know the Aron Kapores are 10 Tfachim. Pashluhu Asara. So then in order to get up to 20 Tfachim, to get a third the way up, we only have 10 Tfachim left of spare space between the top of the Aron and the 1/3 mark in the height of the Mishkan. So since I only have 10 tefachim left, uksiv, v'ha'akruvim porsei knafayim lemala, sochim b'kanfeim ala kapores. So we see karach manaskacha lemame asara. All right, so this is basically what we figured out. The kruvim reach up to the 3rd mark in height. The Mishkan is 60 tefachim. So that means that the kruvim are somewhere within the first third. We know that the Aron is 10 tefachim. So if 10 tefachim up, it can't go more than 20 tefachim. That would suggest that the kruvim are 10 tefachim tall. And what does it say about the kruvim? It says that their wings would be like, it's the same language. It'd be like schach, going over. So what do we see from here? We see that up to the heads of the kruvim is the 10 tefach mark, and we see that the definition of schach is that it goes over the 10 tefach mark. So the same way in biblical language, when describing the kruvim, it means that the schach goes over the heads of the kruvim, not at the same height. It would suggest that when we're talking about schach, again, the same language, for a sukkah, it cannot comprise the 10 tefachim. It has to go over the 10 tefachim, just like the wings of the kruvim. That's what it means to be sochachem. Now, the Gemara interjects, but we'll resolve this pretty quickly. The Gemara says, maybe the wings weren't over their heads, maybe the wings were at head level. So maybe the schach actually could be part of the initial 10 tefachim measurement. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, limala ksiv. It used the word limala, which means what it sounds like. The wings went over the head of the kruvim. Well, once you're saying it's over the heads of the kruvim, maybe the wings are all the way up here for all we know. Maybe the schach's all the way up there. So he says, miksiv lamala. Does it say lamala twice? No, it says lamala once. And I don't think the Gemara is saying it, but we could apply the principle we learned previously to fast the meruba lo tafasta. It just says over the heads of the angels. So who am I to think that it's very far up above their heads? I should go with the most conservative measurement, and that would be right over their heads. And so that is how we get the idea, similarly for Sukkah, that schach cannot comprise the 10 tefachim, but goes over the 10 tefachim. Okay? All right. I hope that made some sense, guys. Did it make some sense? All right. Now, let me just point out, I was looking quickly at the Birchas Abraham, of Erlinger. He cites from the Maharsha and the Pnei Yoshua, both really, I didn't have a chance to take a look at them inside, but I'll take his word for it. He says, so here's the question. What's the Gemara telling me at this point? Are you telling me all the work that we did the past 2 weeks about the measurements of the Aron and the Kapores, so we could understand that 10 Tfachim is derived from the Aron, was for naught? I mean, even though it helps us figure out the measurements here, but rather he says, it's not that we are tearing up, right? Because originally, where did we learn the shear of 10 tefachim? From the Aron. The Aron was 9 tefachim, the Kaporos was 1 tefach. We got 10 tefachim. Well, it sounds like we're not learning from the Aron, but rather we're learning from the Kruvim, the cherubim, right, that were standing on top of the Aron. Well, depending on what case. So, he says, so we need actually both limudim. We need this one to teach us that schach needs to go above the 10 tefach mark. But if you remember, 10 tefachim is not just important for Sukkah, it's important for determining what's a Rishus HaYachid, what's a private domain for Hilchos Shabbos. Remember, we went through a brisa. What was it? It was on Daf Gimel. It was right. The bottom of Gimel Amud Aleph through the top of Gimel Amud Beis. Remember, we had that whole brisa about, well, that was more Abra Amos. That's not the best proof. But there are many areas of halacha where you need a mechitza, and mechitza is going to be 10 tfachim. So Shabbos we don't derive from here. Shabbos we would still derive from our initial drasha of the Aron. So you don't worry, guys. The past 2 weeks were not all for naught. They both complement each other. This additional drasha, we could say, is just supplementing the first one by teaching us that the schach cannot be counted in that 10 tefach measure. Okay, does that make sense? That resonated with me. It made me feel a lot better that we weren't just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, or the Bible with the bathwater for those in the morning. Okay, good. Okay, that was Professor Berman this morning. Okay, good. Toby, and Paul, I see smiling. Okay, and Judd's smiling also. You see, like, you're just smiling stum. That's wonderful. So what happened? It was a line where we were talking about Bible criticism and stuff in the morning. So there was a line that Professor Berman had. Some people, they throw out the Bible with the bathwater. So I like that one. All right. Let's continue the Gemara. So this entire limud was based on some advanced mathematics. Those of you who are mathematically are like laughing at me, like this is like basic arithmetic. Okay, I know. But this was based on a mathematical measurement. Now, in these mathematical measurements, what did we do? We said, how much is 30 amos? We said, what was it, 30 amos, or how much was... We said we had how much was 10 amos? We said 10 amos was 60 tfachim, remember? Well, the thing is, we were operating on a certain premise of conversions. Not everyone agrees that an amma converts into that many tfachim, which makes everything go awry. Here we go. Hanichal Rabbi Meir damar kol ha'amos hayu benonios. This only works according to Rabbi Meir, who understands that the Amos and the Beis HaMikdash were Benonios. Ella Rabbi Yehuda damar Amos shel binyan shisha tfachim v'shel kelim chamisha ma'ik lememar. The issue is, Rabbi Yehuda says that the tfachim we're dealing with here, when we're measuring out the kelim in the Mishkan, the utensils and the different I don't know, is there a better word for utensil? Utensil just sounds like what you use in a kitchen. The different artifacts. Paul, you got a good suggestion on that one?
Yeah, Steinsaltz says vessels.
Oh, yeah, that's probably actually a better translation, a more accurate translation. Yeah, vessel sounds like a bowl. So I mean, okay. So there isn't such a okay. I'll defer to Steinsaltz. So the kalim in the Mishkan were measured when we talked about the measurements. The amma there is a smaller amma. It's a 5 tefach amma. So our entire calculation goes awry, because what happens, according to this calculation, Aronu kaporas kamahavi, how tall then are the Aron and the kaporas? Kamahavi lehu, Tamya, then it's only 8 tfachim altogether. This lowers our measurement. Tamya Upalga, sorry, my mistake. 8.5 tfachim. So Pashu Chatzrei Upalga, that leaves 11.5 tfachim of space, because right, 1/3 of the Mishkan is 20 tfachim. So what am I going to do right now? I have 11.5 left. So Ema Sukkah Ad Havi Chatzri Apalaga. According to Rabbi Yehuda's calculation of an Amma here in this context, that it's only 5 tfachim. That means I am actually left with 11.5 tfachim of space left. So actually, if we're learning from the Kruvim, we should not assume that the sukkah is sufficient to be 10 tfachim. It would actually, according to Rabbi Yehuda, have to be 11.5 tfachim tall. And that's definitely not the raya that we're looking for from this drasha. Forget about throwing out the previous one. This really throws out the previous drasha of the Aron then is no longer redundant. It's been superseded by this 11.5 shita. So rather, Rabbi Yehuda, where does Rabbi Yehuda understand? Everyone agrees that a mechitza is 10 tefachim. So how did Rabbi Yehuda infer this if he can't do it from a drush, from our mathematical equation? I really like Rabbi Yehuda's approach much better, much easier. Halacha gemirila, it's a tradition. The measurements for chatzitzas, we'll talk about this later on. Mechitzas are halacha l'Moshe misinai. They are given to Moshe through tradition. So, right, doesn't that make life much easier where you don't need to have any of all these different nuances and tough stuff? Halacha Moshe misinai, Moshe kibel Torah misinai, Maslu Yoshua, and that's what we have. We have a Masorah for it. All right, so great. That solves everything. We don't need all these complicated drushos. It's just that. Now there is some interesting lumdisha discussion, and I have not delved into deeply, but just for our, I'll note it as a ha'ara, as a footnote, and if anyone wants to investigate it more, by all means. It would seem that according to Rabbi Meir's drasha is focusing on the schach, not on the walls. Now it happens to be what we could say is mamela. If you're going to have schach that has to be above 10 tefachim, we can extrapolate that the walls need to be 10 tefachim, or like halachic 10 tefachim, right? However, Rabbi Yehuda's drasha says nothing about the schach. All it tells me is that I need walls that are 10 tefachim tall. And so Rav Erlinger in Birchas Avram, he goes into different cases of what happens if you have a wall that's not 10 tefachim, but you dig a ditch, and like we've talked about these kind of cases, and there's the schach's above 10 tefachim, but the wall isn't 10 tefachim. Is it still a kosher sukkah, and according to whom? So anyway, just gonna put that out there. The Rabbi Meir seems to emphasize the schach being above 10 tefachim, whereas Rabbi Yehuda's halach l'Moshe Sinai seems to not really tell us much about the schach. It's more about the wall, and in fact, the wall needs to be 10 tefachim. I can infer that the schach needs to go on top of those 10 tefachim. Okay, so that's the basic machlokus. The thing is, the Gemara does not like this. The Gemara says, "What do you mean?" And so I just have to warn you guys. This is a long-winded question. We're only going to do part of the question tonight, because if I go through the whole question, I won't have anything to do next week. It'll take us too far onto Vav Amud Aleph. So we're going to start the question tonight, and I'll make sure to review it, God willing, next week. The question basically is, Toby, you got to unmute though. Okay, afterwards? Okay. No, we're trying to unmute. You're still muted.
Yeah, sorry. So, this is maybe a little bit off, and maybe I should know this by now, but when the Gemara talks about walls, they're talking about a wall that it starts from the ground, right? And it goes up. But in our sukkahs today, very often the walls are hung. They're, like from, in other words, there is like, metal structure, and you've got like the shower curtain loops and whatever, and it hangs down, doesn't necessarily touch the ground. So does it have to be, is the 10 tefachim from the ground, or it's the wall from wherever the wall is
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a case. It'll come up. I think it'll come up later on, if I'm remembering correctly. Remember, we talked about something called good asik, right? So if you have
The
10
word-
tefachim, we imagine it then goes up, right? We said the Christians have Good Friday. We have good asik. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe the joke remember. So if you have 10 tefachim, then it shoots up to the schach from there. Once you have a halach mechitza, there's a related. The sister concept is called good aches mechitza, which is the opposite. When you have the mechitza, and then it comes down from there. So there is a discussion I think we're going to see later on about good aches mechitza, but I think the general understanding is that the walls should be within 3 tefachim of the ground. That way it can operate on lavud, as long as anything is within 3 tefachim of each other, right? Bing bang boom. So then it's considered to be adjacent. It's considered to be one unit. Okay, so that's the general sense. Now there's another issue with the mechitza, the canvas sukkahs, is that if you don't tie them down well, also they should not be moving in the wind more than 3 tefachim. If they move more than 3 tefachim when the wind blows, it's not really forming a proper wall. So you have some flexibility, like, it can kind of go a little bit in this direction, a little bit in that direction, but it should be fastened so it forms a proper wall. That's an important halacha as well. Okay.
But so what you're saying is that so it can be 3 tefachim from the ground.
It would still be considered connected to the ground, I believe.
But then does the wall, but does then the curtain itself have to be 10 tefachim in addition, or it's including those that?
I think this is discussed in the sugya. I'm not remembering offhand, but I think this is my recollection is that this is a discussion later on.
Okay.
But if
wait.
if you shoot me a message and remind me, I can find them a core for you, because this is absolutely discussed. I'm just not remembering precisely where precisely it was. But it's an excellent question, because I know it is addressed.
Okay.
Right, so if you remind me, I will find it for you if you remind me. Okay, so here's the question. The question is, let's get some air conditioning in here. The question is that how can you say that these shiurim are halacha Moshe? What does halacha Moshe Sinai mean? Halacha Moshe Sinai means it's nowhere in the Torah, but God gave it to Moshe at Sinai, which is just very interesting, theology. Remember we were asking that question, Shashis, last week. What did Moshe? I remember Toby brought that up. What did Moshe actually get at Sinai? And then he said, "Well, it's a complicated thing." And so I appreciate you bringing it up. So it's funny. The Gemara asks, "What do you mean halacha Moshe Sinai?" The shiurim, the different forms of measurements we need in halacha, actually come from the Torah itself. When we're talking about the 7 species of Israel, the Shivas Haminim. So here we go. Shiurim Doraisa Ninhu. The Gemara asks, what do you mean? The Shiurim are written explicitly in the Torah. Dechsiv, Eretz Chita Saoro, Gefen Sa'ina, Rimon, Eretz Zayis, Shemen Udvash. So all the Shivas Haminim, the 7 species, we figure out different Shiurim. We'll do example number 1 tonight, and we'll continue next week. Example number 1 is chita, wheat. The question is, so V'amar Achanan kol pasuk is shiurim nemar. This pasuk isn't just saying, oh, there's some nice fruits and stuff in Israel, and you have a nice little seder, and that's cute and everything. But no, he's saying like there's real like halachos behind these fruits. It's not just a nice little cute little thing, but there's actual halachic measurements we're inferring from here, right? The real halachic man seeing this through the lens of halacha. So here we go. Chita. Lebais hamanuga. So, this is actually, all right, this is actually very relevant. What's this week's parsha, guys? Or parshios, I should say.
That's Riyam Mitzorah.
Very good. So this is excellent. So not only can a human contract saras, but in theory, the Gemara section talks about whether it actually ever happened or it's the Church of Kabbalah scholar. But in theory, a house also can contract saras as well. So that's not. Hanichnas lebais hamanuga ukelav. So this is the issue. Kalev here can mean like clothing. Ukelav al kiseifav usandav tabosa biyado uvehain tamein miyan. So if you go into a house that's a bais hamanuga, that's afflicted with saras, and you're holding your ring, you're holding your clothing, you're holding your sandals, you and your items that you're bringing with you immediately become tameh. this might sound similar a little bit to going into an ohel, to a tent that has a tumas mace, that has a cadaver in there. So this might sound similar. However, hayalavush kelev usaglo baraglo tabosav etzbaosav hu tamimiyad v'hein torim tahorim achi yisha b'chdei achilas pras paschitim lo pasorin meisev v'ocha beliftan. Let me break down exactly what I just said there. However, if you are wearing your clothing, you're wearing your rings, you're wearing your sandals, you're wearing your what was the other example there? Your clothing, what was it? Your clothing, your sandals, and your rings. You're wearing them properly, so then you become tummy immediately. However, your articles of clothing that you are wearing don't become tummy immediately, but it takes the sheer kidei achilas pras. This, it was worth coming tonight just to learn this halacha, because it's not just relevant to this Gemara, but the shir kidei achilas pras is relevant in hilchos, brachos in general, and most famously, such infamously, from Seder nights. So, I guess we're first day Rosh Chodesh, so I can still teach things related to Pesach, right? So what's the shir kidei achilas pras? Back in the day, they would make a loaf of bread, and the pras would be half a loaf of bread. So they didn't eat 3 meals a day; they ate 2 meals a day. One half of the loaf was in the, in the morning, and one was later on in the day. I don't know precisely, maybe toward the evening is when they had the second loaf of bread. In other words, half a loaf of bread constitutes the shear for a meal. Okay, so what Chazal said in many areas of Hilchos Brachos, for instance, one would only, this isn't just like a Hilchos Pesach thing, one would only would make a bracha achrona if they ate enough bread in the sheer kidei achilas pras, meaning you ate it's actually not that hard because you're eating a kazais, the volume of an olive. Well, I guess it depends. This is the whole controversy on Pesach night. Well, what's the volume of an olive? So the shir kidei achilas pras is, now there's a whole debate. How big is the shir kidei achilas pras? Well, here's the thing. This is a lot of people like to point out. It correlates with how big you think a kazais is, because it's made up of, I'm forgetting off how many kazais. It's got to be more than 6 kazaisim. It's made up of a certain amount of kazaisim. Now, you forgive me, I'm forgetting the precise number offhand. So if you think a kazais is really big, then that means the amount of time it takes to eat half a loaf of bread is also a really long amount of time, because it's a bigger piece of bread. So, and if you think the size of kazais is actually kazais, like an olive that we see today, then the shear is much smaller. So there's a whole range. Every rabbi and his grandmother has like a different shita in how many minutes it could be. Maybe it's almost up to 10 minutes we could give you. The thing is that on Pesach night at the Seder, this is like the classic thing that all of us Orthodox people like to make fun of all the very frum people for doing, which is that they'll take the chumrah both ways in the Tarti de Sasre. They will eat a really huge shear of matzah, but they'll eat it as if the sheer kidei process is like 2 minutes, and they're like shoving down all this matzah really fast. But mimanav shach, either it's a small amount, so then it's a small amount, you can eat that quickly, or it's a huge amount, but then you have more time. So that's famously where the sheer kidei process comes up, but it's actually relevant to just saying birchas hamazon in general, that you have to have enough bread in the sheer kidei process. Now, how do we assess this? This is why we brought up this whole idea. What kind of bread, though, are we talking about? I had wheat matzah for Pesach. Marissa had spelt matzah because she was trying to, make sure to have something that was more gluten friendly, or anti-gluten, gluten enemy, or whatever, anti-gluten. So paschitim lo pasor, and this is talking about wheat as opposed to barley. In case you're not sure, Rashi points out that it's easier to eat wheat than barley, and then it's non etzem kiso. Velopas oren. So mesev ocha belifton, and then also you are eating it in a way that you're focused on your food. Sometimes you can eat, you can be getting up. This is talking about when you're reclining and you are eating it with a dip, with a condiment. That's considered. That's how we assess the shir kidei achilas pras. What's the point of all this? The point of all this is we see that the Shir Kedei Achilas Pras is assessed based on a chita, based on wheat, which is min haTorah, right? And so, Arthur, I know you're demonstrating for us right now, right? You're demonstrating for us precisely the Shir Kedei Achilas Pras. So that's what we arranged together. So Exhibit A. So that's the question we're going to leave off with: is how can we say the shiurim are halacha l'Moshe Sinai only? There's clearly a scriptural basis for it in the Torah. Okay. All right. Shkayach, everybody. Good learning together. And it's Thursday night, so I guess wishing you all a good Shabbos.
You too, Rabbi. Thank you.
Take care.
I was sorry.
Oh, good Chodesh. Yes, indeed.